This week, Emmet and I discuss a new book from Avery Hill Publishing, Lights, Planets, People by Molly Naylor and Lizzy Stewart. It's a graphic novel with layers of meaning, including some that are communicated by the art and the coloring. First, if you're enjoying this podcast, we'd love it if you'd support the show at patreon.com/deconcomics for as little as $2 a month. All patrons get our bi-weekly videos featuring 20th century TV trivia quizzes. More perks and bonus content at higher donation levels, including discussions of MCU movies and Lee Ditko Spider-Man stories, and help us meet our goals to unlock the earliest episodes of our podcast and put them all back in the feed. Pledge your support now at patreon.com/deconcomics. This is Tim.
And this is Emmet.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo talking with Emmet in Victoria State, Australia. How are you doing?
Well, Tim, as long-time listeners may remember, we've been fighting something of a marsupial campaign for the last couple of months, and it died off because we had a very bitter winter. Oh, it stepped up a notch again this morning. The dirty protest is in full effect. What they're doing now is they're congregating around my car. So I think they've decided, well, we're not going to let you get into your car without stepping on anything. So this morning was an adventure, a bit of an obstacle course, let's say.
Minefield.
Yes. So I had to drop my partner to a class, and then I as I was walking out, I was going, "Oh, we need bags to deal with this right now." So
wow. After
we finish recording, I'm going to go out there and do a bit of a tidy up of the garden because I think they've unleashed hell on us.
Wow. In our previous episode, I was talking about my injury that I at least partly blame on a crow. And a couple of days later, I got an X-ray and found that I broke a rib. And it's getting better now. My accident was a week ago today as we're recording this. And it hurts, but not nearly as much as it did a week ago. So slowly getting better.
Very good. And yeah, I'm glad you're doing better and just, keep resting up. But yeah, when I think we're on the cusp of some sort of animal revolution, Tim. I think we're being targeted.
Okay. All right. So we've got another book to talk about. This has nothing to do with Stan Lee.
Yes.
We may come back to that or we may not. I haven't decided yet. Still, I mean, I'd like to hear from listeners about that. But this book is called Lights, Planets, People. It's a graphic novel written by Molly Naylor, art by Lizzy Stewart. And I found this to be kind of a complex book. In fact, it was on the second read that I said, what? I kind of started to get it the second time through, and I'm not completely sure I've put it together yet. But it's kind of an interesting book. What did you think of it?
I think I know what you mean. I found it very rewarding as a read. I thought it was very enjoyable, and I was interested to learn that it's adapted from a stage play.
Oh.
And I can see that. I can see how it would work as a stage play. And I for people who may have listened to the discussion Kumar and I had about Far Sector, I don't want to come off as comic book essentialist here, where I'm saying a comic book has to be a comic book and nothing else, But I because I don't believe that. I think comics are a very fluid medium and they can adapt and take on many different things. What I find interesting about this is there is an expression, particularly in relation to films, adapted from stage plays. That it's a very stagey film. It's a very stage-bound film. You can see how the director hasn't actually visualized how to make the story from the play work more on screen. Here, I don't think that's the case. A lot of the action does literally take place on a stage. It's a lecture hall stage, and a lectern. So you can see how it would work as a show. But the use of flashbacks and then the use of exaggerated effect, so in terms of use of color, use of people occasionally change shape, they increase in size as they blast off into space. This is a comic book about an astronomer, and a lot of it is I would say very allegorical in relation to the experience of being bipolar. So I find the experience of reading this comic is a lot like an actor's interpretation of the script of a play, where how they emotionalize the words gives you an understanding of what that character is going through. I feel the comic itself here reads in such a way that you get the psychological makeup of this person, Maggie Hill. So I found it really interesting in that respect. I found this actually is a interesting collaboration between a writer of an original theatrical work and a comic book artist, Lizzy Stewart, saying, "All right, how do I visualize all of this and make it engaging for the reader?"
Yeah,
I really enjoyed that.
So briefly about the story, you mentioned the main character is an astronomer. Her name is Maggie. She's going to be, well, she is in the story speaking to a group of young women who she hopes to inspire into going into astronomy. But it's broken up with these flashbacks to Maggie in a counseling session and talking about her romantic relationship with another woman, although she's defensive through a lot of that.
Yes.
and refusing to talk about certain things, which, it kind of comes clear by the end of the story. But what I realized on the second time through was that I think you're either going to say, well, yeah, of course, Tim, or you're going to say, no, Tim, you're crazy. That wasn't there.
Okay.
But so it seems like the sort of space aspect of it and Maggie's relationship are paralleling each other.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So she's talking about her project to find a new Earth-like planet for Earth people to move to, rather than improving Earth or fixing Earth. And at the same time, in the counseling session, Maggie is making excuses about breaking up with her girlfriend and looking for a new one rather than, improving or fixing the relationship that she's in.
Yeah, or objecting to the necessity of relationships altogether. What can you get from somebody else? And that's somewhat informed by her experience as a woman in astronomy who, at a younger age, her intelligence and her merit wasn't recognized because she was a woman and she's entering into a very male-dominated field. So she's had to go it alone. And you're right, the visual metaphor of the rocket, the rocket straining against gravity in the atmosphere and, heading off into the void, the unexplored void, that is a really interesting sense of identification for her, I think. And she's had this experience as a child of watching the moon landing as well. So she has this sense of her identity is tied up with rockets, with space travel, with science, and her merit as an astronomer wasn't recognized as a young woman, and now she's trying to inspire other young women, and they aren't necessarily interested in what she has to say, and she has to sort of get them on board. So she's decided this is her purpose in life, and meanwhile this relationship that she had with Jane has been let to go fallow. Like this person who was so open to her and willing to go along with her and appreciates the importance of her work, but needs there needs to be some give and take. There needs to be some collaboration there. It's simply she's not capable of giving it, or she's not recognizing what she needs to do because she's so focused on this one thing, this rocket, this blasting off into space. So yeah, as you're right, there's a lot of thematic allegory, there's a lot of visual allegory, and it's an exciting comic in that respect, because I feel as if it's approaching this with a great deal of intelligence and creativity.
Yeah, I had that realization about it, and I was seeing the how that carried through her relationship with her project, the Elpis project, and her relationship with Jane continued to parallel each other. Beyond that, I wasn't quite sure what to say about the story. It was, well, let's talk about the art.
Yes, good.
But I feel like I've seen this kind of style before. I don't know that I've seen Lizzy Stewart's work, but the style felt kind of familiar to me.
Yes, yeah, you could almost see it as a emerging house style.
From Avery Hill.
Avery Hill, Nobrow as well. Some of the books we've reviewed from Nobrow, similar style again. I think it's a delicate line. There is not that much of an emphasis on particular detailing of faces. It's usually a combination of simple lines and dots to represent eyebrows, nose, mouth.
Yeah, well, I found that made it hard to identify the characters' ages.
Well, this is what I was going to ask you. So, from context, we know that Maggie is at least in her 60s. And because Jane also talks about turning 60. And they seem to be they're contemporaries. And also she witnessed the moon landing. And now she's speaking to an audience of young women who are on mobile phones. So we can guess the gap of time from that. But I thought that sort of, how would you describe it? That vagueness of age, let's say, actually worked in its favor to some degree, because I feel as if what happens through the lecture is she's trying to inspire these young women to head into STEM. What she actually inspires is something entirely different. And that's the crux of the resolution of this story, which is that, recognition of her bipolar, the thing she's been running away from, is something that finds commonality in some of the young women watching her.
Yeah, that's where the inspiration for some of them comes from.
Yes, and in particular, one young woman in particular who actually witnessed her having something close to a panic attack in the ladies' bathroom. So you see, because their faces are similarly lined, there's some indication of age in Maggie's face, but like beyond that, they're very similar. I actually saw that they were on. That similarity in appearance actually spoke to their similarity in terms of their character. I wondered if that was, I mean, it's interesting as well, because like Jane and Maggie are actually a mixed race couple, which I didn't realize until the color.
Yeah, that was the weirdest thing, I thought, because when it was drawn without much color, they appeared to have the same skin color. They both appeared to be white, and then suddenly it goes to full color, and Susan is dark-skinned, and
yes,
it's like, how did that happen?
Well, no, I mean, because if you recall, if you go back to the sequence where they meet for the first time in the tea shop, they're being served by a Sikh gentleman. So he's wearing the headdress, and he also his features are pale. So, but from context, you would assume this person has Indian heritage or is from somewhere within that region. So she's established in that moment that the characters all happen to have they happen to be pale in appearance, on this page. The use of color, this limited use of color, it's mostly blues and whites and orange or sort of ochre or whatever. And then later on, blacks pops up a bit as well. When the color drops in, which is the relationship, so these moments of togetherness, that's when the color pops in, and we actually see in more detail their respective age comes through more. I feel that's when Maggie's actually she's actually sharing a moment in time with somebody else. But when the colors are cool, she's on this intellectual track. So she's not experiencing emotion.
Okay.
Does that scan for you? That's how I read it.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. So, yeah, the changes in how it's colored are reflecting her mood, her way of thinking. And yeah, I mean, there are some other points where she connects with other characters, and yeah, then suddenly it goes to the warmer, full color.
Yes, I think that's it. And her sense of anxiety about giving the lecture is again represented by the students and the entire lecture hall being in this orange, this oppressive orange.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the whole page is just orange practically.
Yeah. And she...
Makes it a little hard to read.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is, and again, look, maybe I'm building a bridge here that, there's no plan for. But part of it, I feel, is when she is making a connection or when she is trying to inspire, she lights up, But when she's down, when she feels like she's wasting her time, she continues to apologize to the students because she realizes, oh, I'm not getting through to you. I'm not inspiring you. That's really important to her. She fades into the orange. And there's also a sequence where Jane and Maggie have a conversation and like Jane's actually realizing, oh, I don't know if this person actually wants to be with me. I don't think she wants a relationship with me. And this young woman who has been married suddenly just bursts into their table and says, come with me, come on, let's party. I love you so much. You're such a cute couple. I want you to, you relationship goals, #relationship goals. Come with me. And she's all in white because she's a stranger, but she's got a dash of color in her headpiece. And I think that's meant to, again, I think that reads to me, the Sisu color reads to me as her youth and her energy and her excitement and her love is just breaking through this coldness on Maggie's part. And as they warm up, as they start dancing with the wedding party, the two characters, Jane and Maggie, start warming, their colors warm and they become more detailed. So I think, long and short of it is, there's intentionality here. I don't think it's just a slavish use of a particular hairstyle. I think it's been used to an effect.
Well, and having worked in printing, when I see differences in color, I think cost savings, and I guess that has nothing to do with it in this case.
Yes, that famous example of the Incredible Hulk going from gray to green because green was cheaper.
Well, there's that too, but like I once worked on a magazine where we were given certain number of color pages per month, and the rest had to be black and white. And so I think of it that way, like this is on this set of 4 pages, and this is all black and white, right? But no, that has nothing to do with this.
There was one bit. Now, okay, so just for context, Tim, I've just quit my job. No, it's all good. I think I found a safe harbor already, but okay. I've just quit my job, and part of what I did professionally for my day job was I worked with scientists, and a lot of my work involved us figuring out how to communicate what the scientist was trying to get across. Okay, so let's just say this comic landed for me because I was going, yeah, you guys aren't great at that. Hey, if you ever want to piss off a scientist or a doctor, a medical doctor, try to explain to them how to write a sentence. That always that goes down well. That goes down really well. They love being talked to like that. So there's a sequence in this comic and part of Maggie's whole intellectual authority is that she's a scientist, and therefore she knows, like she understands things, and she's having a therapy session, and then they have this debate. There's a brief moment where the therapist is emotionally charged herself and actually bursts into the session, if you like. She breaks character, and says, "No, therapy is a science." You know, human beings, and she's talking about psychology. She's talking about therapy. She's saying it's a science. Even if, and this is a quote from her little speech, even if we do put the word social in front of it, and she's talking about criterions and accuracy of measurement, and I actually haven't. Look, I don't know. Maybe this is artistic effect, and I am not a psychologist. And I never studied psychology. I studied philosophy. So, you can discount everything I'm going to say from now on. But I do think there's a difference there. I do think, like psychology, certainly psychoanalysis is a failed science because a lot of what Freud set out has been discounted. But it's useful still as a point of investigation, right? So it's not a working hypothesis anymore, but it's a good grounding for what psychoanalysis wants to be next, and psychology as well. You look at these forms of inquiry into mental health, these forms of inquiry into what makes us conscious human beings, and you go, all right, where do we go next? Let's discuss these things. But I don't think it's a strictly theoretical model that is based on provable theses as science is. I think a lot of it is about, it's closer to a way of discussing how we express ourselves. And a lot of that is bound up with things we do not know. So I don't, and not in the sense of things we can prove or disprove. It's things we simply cannot know. Our unconscious selves, how we exist in this world, how we interact with one another. A lot of that is based on presuppositions that we are useful, but we don't really know if they're true or not. I had question marks over that sequence. I was just going, I don't know if that, because it's seen as a moment where Maggie's put in her place almost. Is that thought of you? Because I looked at that. That's what she's saying. Look, this is a science of the soul, if you like, or science of the mind. And she's not challenged. It's a way of knocking Maggie off her sort of self-appointed sense of authority. And it's useful. It's a useful scene in terms of this overall comic book, but I didn't agree with the proposal. Okay. I mean, and again, speaking as somebody who's had to read a lot of philosophy textbooks, part of the issue with philosophy is that philosophy isn't a science. And in the 20th century, a lot of philosophers tried to equate or relate philosophy more to science. And I always felt, but you don't have to. That's not what you do. That's not what philosophy is. That's not what it's about. It's about discussion. It's about reflection. It's not proving material things in this world. It's about trying to orient ourselves to life and death and all the things in between.
Right. Well, I guess I did have a slight twinge of really as I was reading that, because I mean the goal with psychiatry is more to help people solve problems rather than kind of do experiments and discover things. And I mean, I don't know. I suppose you could say it's a kind of science, but not in the same way as astronomy is, or physics, or chemistry. Although if we have any scientist listeners, I'd love to hear from them on this.
Or psychologists who do believe that it's based on a provable set of theorems. That would be great. I'd be interested to know. But the whole purpose of this back and forth between the therapist and Maggie is then to set up the next page, where again we have that burst of color.
Yeah,
because they're having an emotional connection, and even the therapist is like Maggie's isolation from other people based on her role as an astronomer. The therapist's isolation is part of her role. She has to be objective, but in this moment, those two sides are broken down and they're having this emotional connection, and so it's a beautiful page. It leads to a beautiful moment. I appreciate what it's doing. I appreciate the purpose of the scene. My issue was I didn't agree with the argument, if you like.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say on the matter.
Coming up, recent hostility toward the humanities in education. The relevance, if any, of Maggie's sexuality to the story. And is Lights, Planets, People a good title for this work? Don't forget you can help to unlock classic early episodes of Deconstructing Comics, help me return all the old episodes to this podcast feed, and at the $4 level, get access to hours of additional full-length podcasts. At the $10 level, you can review the book of your choice with me here on this show. Support Deconstructing Comics and our other shows at patreon.com/deconcomics. Or you can send a one-time donation via PayPal to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support.
You like cheap comic books, right? Well, I'm Professor Allen, and I talk about cheap comic books on the Quarterbin podcast. In every episode, I'll dissect a single comic from my collection, as long as I paid no more than 25 cents for the issue. Forget about $4 new comics that you can read in 4 minutes, or crossover events that can cost $100 to collect. Join me in the Quarterbin, where even bad comics are a bargain, and good ones are a steal. The Quarterbin podcast is part of the Relatively Geeky Podcast Network. Visit us at relativelygeekypodcast.blogspot.com or search Relatively Geeky or Quarterbin Podcast in iTunes. I guarantee it'll be worth every penny.
Now, there was a scene that, I got what the scene was trying to say, but I was having a little trouble making it fit into the story. It's that bit where Maggie is flashing back to when she was younger and getting started, and it's like she's walking into what appears to be a men's restroom.
Yeah, so
and there's a toilet that's sitting there surrounded by a table with all these guys in suits standing around smoking, and she has to use the toilet there. And I got that, that a woman might feel that way in that setting, surrounded by all these guys. That I understood, but how did that fit into the overall story? I was not quite sure.
Again, it's a metaphor. Like,
Sure.
Yeah, so like they literally don't have a women's bathroom.
Right. Yeah, I knew this was symbolic, clearly.
But also, I think it's practical as well. They literally don't have a place for a woman to go relieve herself. She has to use the men's room. So they're doing everything they can to make her feel excluded. And that's why they're all sitting around watching her on the toilet. They're intimidating her. Leave, just leave. You don't belong here. That's more or less what it's about. It's funny, actually. I initially, when I read that sequence, I understood that the scenes about there isn't a women's bathroom. She has to use the men's bathroom. And then I thought, I didn't notice the toilet in the next scene. I thought it transitioned to her going into a meeting room and being surrounded by all these men who then are not engaging her, and they're trying to intimidate her, and she's the only woman there, and they're all smoked, they're puffing the cigarettes, and they're just talking to one another, they're not acknowledging her. But yeah, there's a toilet in the middle of the room. So it's clearly a sort of a dream sequence, and she's trying to communicate to these students that she wants them to be the change where there will be more gender balance within the sciences and STEM. Now, how do you feel about that as well? Because I think that's worthy, but maybe I should shut my mouth, but I kind of feel there's been this sentiment about STEM, I mean, the importance of STEM and getting women to STEM, and I absolutely agree with that. But then for some reason, because this is a zero-sum game, there's also been this argument that the humanities, therefore, are useless. Don't bother studying languages, don't bother studying history, don't bother studying philosophy, obviously.
Right.
Why would you? Just do science, do math, do engineering.
Yeah, well, as someone who never got along in science, I do mean this kind of STEM emphasis, or even the coinage of the term STEM, happened long after I finished high school. But I'm always like, well, what's wrong with humanities? I have always, or felt for a long time, that those things get undervalued. Like to have a music program, or, I was big in the music department when I was in high school. Certainly not in science. And I mean, some people are just not cut out for science.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. And also, part of what the humanities do is that, and this is, I know I'm speaking to the choir here, but they teach critical thinking. Mm-hmm. And the importance of that is that you will have not necessarily the knowledge of particular knowledge of a particular subject, but you'll be able to approach it in an inquisitive way. And therefore, you probably get more out of it than somebody who just was taught purely this one track, one track of learning. So the point of the humanities is to essentially give cultural context, historical context, to an individual and a sense of what's out there. And what I'm worried about is that some of this academic push towards purely professional output is functionalist, is just designed to create highly qualified workers.
Mm-hmm.
And where's the space for imagination, creative thinking, particularly in a situation like this where a person has to sit in a room full of students and try to explain to them, here are the things we should be doing. And the students rightly push back because they're saying to her, well, why are we so fixated on finding exoplanets? Why aren't we fixing the planet we're on currently? Mm-hmm. And she's like, oh yeah, it's because of business. That's not going to change. And they're like going, well, that's not good enough. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of discussion that doesn't happen when people are just being driven through this funnel. Okay, you've been appointed a role. Do that role. Don't question it. Don't go outside of it. Do that thing. So I think the comic is aware of that. So need for some sort of critical distance, and certainly Maggie's whole character is that she's too wrapped up in this one field to appreciate not only what's going on around her, but her own life. Mm-hmm. So I imagine that's probably a thread that's running through this, but it just popped out to me that the hostility to the humanities from some within the STEM debate. And I think I don't want to generalize that's the STEM campaign. I don't think that's true. I think a lot of people who are interested in science and technology and so forth are interested in all forms of knowledge. But certainly there seems to be a hostility towards the humanities in some of the discussions around STEM. And I just wanted to flag that as I do not agree.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I think the emphasis on STEM is, I think you're right. It's like so that we can do more work or whatever. And so, the humanities get undervalued. Here's a question for you. Do you think the story would be any different if Maggie were straight? Do you think that her being gay makes a difference in the story, or is it just incidental?
I think what I enjoyed about her sexuality as far as the storytelling was that it wasn't commented upon. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a coming out drama. It was matter of fact. It was her reality. It was what was,
Yeah. I thought that was cool. I mean, it didn't really, I didn't think it really made a difference. I mean, if she were dating a man, I think it would still be the same story.
Yes. That said, I do think it's a further point of isolation for her.
Mm-hmm.
I think it informs our sense of her as a person, that she came up through this time when she would have been further marginalized because of her sexuality. And, there's that moment where she reflects on all her lovers, and there's some line about, like, you have the potential to meet so many people in your lifetime, and then of that group of people, there are so many people you could fall in love with, and of that group of people, there's so many people that you would be a match with, implying, sexuality is a factor in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I thought that was, again, it's sort of touched on, but it's not dwelt on in a sort of browbeating way. I really, I enjoyed that this was just her reality. This is just who she is. This is a matter of fact presentation of her sexuality.
Yeah.
But I think it's a factor in her, as I said, being marginalized within her professional field. And whenever we see her, with the two sequences we actually see her at work, the one is the surreal flashback with the toilet in the middle of a meeting room, and the other is her discussing her project with some of her colleagues. And again, they're all men.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, there are very few women in her space professionally.
And for her, that eliminates any dating possibilities.
Part of it, but also just that sense of kinship, even like just being with someone.
Sure.
Not necessarily romantically, but just having that connection with someone is limited. But yeah, and then that's why so much of the story takes place with women. And she's got her therapist is a woman, her partner is a woman, and the main bulk of the comic is based on this lecture, which is mainly women in the audience, young women, who she's trying to connect with after having spent her entire professional career surrounded by men.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's a factor. I think it's there. I think it would be a different story if she was heterosexual, because I think she would have had more social lubricant, if you like. She would have had an easier time getting through this life.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not an easy time. Let me quickly say, if not an easy time, because she's still living sexism and misogyny and all the rest of it. But her queerness, I think.
Yeah, it's not the point of the story, but it adds a dimension to it.
Yes. Yeah, I think so too.
Okay.
But a lot of the imagery as well is quite interesting, just in terms of her sense of being drowning. There's this repeated depiction of depression as her drowning.
Yeah.
And she comes out of one of these sequences, these surreal sequences, in the middle of a meeting, and she's soaking wet in the meeting. She's not actually soaking wet, but her sense of self is that she's soaking wet because she knows she's hitting a bipolar low. She's hitting one of the low points. And it's kind of sad that she talks about how she's managed this condition. She just takes sick leave and she just pretends she has appendicitis or something. She can't talk about it.
Yeah, even if it's the culmination of her project, then she just misses it.
So while this is not a gay coming out drama, I think it is a mental health coming out drama. It's about somebody reckoning with her psychological condition publicly and inspiring younger people to also speak to that. I had a friend who she met Carrie Fisher in Sydney at a convention, and she went up to her, and I've never done these celebrity walk up things because what would you say? I never know what to say to any of these people.
Hi, I liked your movie.
Yeah, I've interviewed celebrities, I've interviewed actors and directors. I can do that because that's about talking about this particular thing they're working on, and I do like to maybe throw in, oh, I also liked you in this other thing you did, and see their face light up. But this, I never know what to say to somebody at this sort of celebrity.
When you're
fan
functioning as a
convention.
fan instead of a journalist.
Yeah, the fan cattle call. I don't know what to do. Anyway, this friend of mine did know what to do. She went up to Carrie Fisher, and she said, "Thank you for being so open about your bipolar condition. You actually inspired me. You gave me a voice. I felt there was somebody out there in the world." And apparently, Carrie Fisher just like hugged her and said, "I love you," And so a beautiful moment for two people. Like, that's a connection. That's if this was this comic, that's when the color would have just burst on the page.
Yes.
So I really appreciate. What my friend did was beautiful. I think that's a beautiful thing to do. And for Carrie Fisher to be there with her in that moment is lovely. I think an acknowledgement of that condition. But I think that's what this comic ends on, a very similar moment. And it hit me. It hit me emotionally. I thought that was quite lovely. So, yeah, I'm curious how that would have played in the theater, because it really works as a comic book page. Like, it really works here. I'm curious to see, did they have a person on a raised dais on the stage, and then there was almost like a jury box of students played by actors occasionally shouting out questions, and then one of them, like 12 Angry Men or something, one of them sort of just speaking up at the end. Like, how I'm trying to visualize that. I can't imagine how the play would have gone.
Yeah.
Or maybe a voice on a recording or something. I don't know.
Maybe some lighting changes. I'm just noticing when the student is mentioning that she's also bipolar, and she and Maggie connect, but it doesn't go to full color there.
No, it
That's
doesn't.
Interesting. I mean, the figures remain orange. The background changes to kind of a space background. So it represents some kind of a connection, but it's not going to full color like it does other places.
Yeah. Is it that she has actually inspired them, just not in the way she intended to inspire them? Like, she was trying to inspire them with this love of discovery of space, but she's actually inspired them to be honest with themselves in terms of their mental health.
Maybe it's like, well, okay, I inspired them some way, not the way I was trying to.
Yeah. And prior to that, we have a moment which I hope I don't want to box in Lizzy Stewart here. But the moment when Maggie has a manic episode in the therapy session itself, and she believes she's won therapy. She realizes what she needs to do. She's going to inspire these young women, and she starts growing in size. There's another sequence later where she's growing in size and she's walking across the landscape. That felt a bit like, and I know I've talked about this book on this comic before, but Tilly Walden's I Love This Part. When the two young women, when they are, again, connected emotionally, they're talking about music and their relationship and their feelings for one another, they then become giant size, and they are like striding over their town, because their world has now shrunk to just the two of them, I feel like, and in that comic, it's a beautiful moment. It's like this lovely sequence. Whereas here, I think it's almost sinister. Like, you get the sense of her joy at being inspired, but at the same time, we know it's too extreme for source of inspiration. She now believes she's worked out what she needs to do.
What did you make of the title?
Okay, yeah. So this was something
Lights, Planets, People.
I was going to make a comment on this. I think they should have retitled it. I think it's a good title for a play. I suspect it's intriguing. I can even see it being a good title for Maggie's own paper, where she's trying to inspire young women to go to STEM. But
Yeah, because I think the title comes from something she says during her presentation.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I get that. But my whole thing is, I'm trying to imagine a bookseller looking at an order list
Uh-huh.
and seeing that, and like, what does it suggest to them? Like, what's it saying? What's it,
It doesn't necessarily sound like it's a work of fiction, if you call it that.
Yeah, I don't think it. I think they should have gone with a different title. I don't know what that title would be. I don't want to armchair advise people on what to do, but I do feel as if it's a new work, if you like. It's a new medium, so there's maybe an opportunity to revise that title to reflect the new medium.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you're dealing with a different audience. You're dealing with people who read graphic novels. What will catch the eye of the reader? Because you're facing an uphill battle with the flooded market of comics, and
Yeah.
how do you stand out?
Right. Yeah. I think if I saw this in a bookstore, I would assume that it was like just a nonfiction work about space.
Yeah. So, speaking from personal experience, I released a comic book this year. I called it The Beating of Wings because it was a doing title. There's a suggestion of action. There's a suggestion of what's significant about these wings, and I think it's a phrase, I've seen it being used a lot in relation to angels. I think there may be some poem from back in the day.
It's giving me a flashback to a week ago when I had the beating of wings directly above my head.
Yes, in your attack. Well, yeah. So you have a sense of danger and threat, and
yes,
the comic is largely about winged demons attacking a city. So that's the beating of wings. So you're lucky you just had to deal with a crow or whatever it was. But that's how I approached the naming of that comic book. I was like saying, okay, I want to suggest what this is about, but I want it to be a doing phrase. It suggests action. It suggests a threat, menace.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was thinking. Whereas this Lights, Planets, People, and with an exclamation mark, I don't quite know what it would suggest to somebody else. When you dropped this file to me, it started downloading. I saw this thing. I was like, I don't know what this is. Like,
yeah,
my immediate,
exactly.
I had no connection to it. And just for folks listening, I started reading it, and immediately my feelings became much warmer.
Mm-hmm. And
I genuinely was like, this is gorgeous. This is a really lovely put together piece. The use of color is great. The story is wonderful. The ideas within it are really interesting. I found it very engaging. But different title. And also, turn to the cover. The use of font for the creators, Molly Naylor and Lizzy Stewart, the choice of font, I think it's Arial or something.
Uh-huh.
I was a little alarmed by that.
It looks odd below the handwritten title of the book.
It looks like legal indicia. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, it looks. I feel like it looks kind of cheap.
And again, I think it's being done for a reason. I'm not clear what that reason is, and
maybe it's just science. I don't know.
I don't know. Is this suggestive of that? Or is this suggestive of? Is this meant to be like a college campus poster? Is this what the poster for the talk would look like? Maybe. I don't know. Like somebody a supporter of Maggie's at the college has put this together and advertising it. I'm not. I don't know, but it just underwhelmed me before I opened it.
Mm-hmm.
Before I opened the in this case a file, but I can imagine somebody holding this in their hands, and that visual design of the cover, it doesn't really capture me. And I'm saying all this because I want people to open it, and I want people to read it, because I think it's beautiful, and I also I don't want to insult the good folks at Avery Hill, because I think they do incredible work. And this is a beautiful book, but again, on the interior page, we've got the same use of font for the creators. I don't know, something a little punchier. Just smacks us around the head with it.
Yeah, and I
think you're right. I think it's meant to be like a PowerPoint almost.
Looking at the cover design, I guess it doesn't look like it's necessarily a nonfiction book, because it's got, the characters drawn on it and some things like lamps and coffee cups and stuff. But yeah, still, I'm not sure that I would know what it was. And I didn't know what it was when I first opened the PDF.
Yeah. It was it was unusual for me as a reader to look at a comic and have absolutely no sense as to what I was about to get into. Given how much comics is reliant on our sort of genre savviness and our knowledge of comic book storytelling tropes, you can more or less hang your hat on any number of hooks, and the readership will immediately understand what you're going to do. They'll almost know what the kind of story is about to read. But yeah, I was taken out by this. But again, once I got into the story, I thought it was fantastic.
And yeah, I might suggest it needs to be read at least twice, or at least I needed to read it twice, because the first time I didn't get it, I think. I mean, I saw one dimension of the story, but I wasn't seeing the symbolism in a lot of it until the second time through. Anything else we need to say about this?
No, I think we've covered most of what I wanted to say. I genuinely do really want to recommend this to people. Like I do think any quibbles I've mentioned have just been that, quibbles. Like I don't want to put anybody off reading this. I think it's well worth your time.
Yeah.
And I think it's very well paced. I think the use of color and the art style is fantastic. I think Lizzy Stewart has done a great job of visually interpreting a stage play to this new medium, and making it land in a very unique way. Very unique. My mother-in-law would kill me for saying that. In a unique way.
Yeah.
So yes, I really enjoyed it.
Where did you pick up that it was a stage play?
Oh, it's actually it's in the back matter. They talk about it. So they talk about it being adapted.
Oh, yeah, okay. Molly says Lights Planet people started life as a stage play.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'd be curious to do some additional reading on what that was. And I see Lizzy Stewart has another graphic novel, Walking Distance, that Avery Hill put out, and I'd be interested in reading that, because I see it's got some good notices from the Herald Scotland and the Guardian. So it's getting some notices there. So I'd be curious to read more of her stuff. I think she's a good creator, and I think this is an interesting piece of work.
Yeah,
all the reasons already listed.
Lights, Planets, People is published by Avery Hill. You can help Deconstructing Comics and all our podcasts by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics. And go to deconstructingcomics.com to connect to us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, to shop on Amazon to support the show, and to find links to subscribe to the podcast. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and we'll critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. Next week, from our Patreon show, Tim catches up with the MCU. Mulele and I discuss the movie Iron Man 3. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.